Hey, what's going, friends and fam? This is Princeton Brown from Sonic Gold Productions, and today I'm excited to just talk with you guys about mixing and sharing a little bit of my journey and what were the top 3 or top 4 or so things that revolutionized mixing for me and just became an automatic game changer.
Sonic Gold Productions.
So, by the way, if this type of content resonates with you, if you are a audio engineer, a producer, or an artist who mixes their own music and you're always struggling to figure out mixing, you think you're getting good, but then you check in the car and your mix ends up bad or whatever it may be. I was once that person, where I would do mixes and spend hours and hours and check it on my car or wherever it may be, and it's just like, what is going on? But anyways, I wanted to share with you a free resource. I created a brand new production guide that you guys can go download on my website just by clicking the link below. I also have a free mixing mini course that's going to take you through 7 or so different ways that you can finalize and improve your mixes once you get to the stage of completing them. A lot of people get to the stage where they think they're done with their mix and they don't realize there's so much more that you can do. And I'm going to go over this in my free mini course that you can do to improve your mix. So if that's something that you're interested in, click the links in below to get to that. But today we're here to talk about mixing, and most importantly, what I thought were the 3 main things that revolutionized mixing for me and just was a game changer for me in mixing. So the number 1 thing I would say would be mixing in mono and at low volume. Why is this important? So you have 2 speakers. They're usually always set up in stereo unless you have a mono button activated or you have a mono plugin, for example, on your DAW in your mixing session. The reason why mixing in mono is so important and revolutionized the game for me is because when you mix in mono, all your sounds collapse to one basically stream of audio, and everything is piled on top of each other. And so if you think about it, it's very cluttered, right? Everything is smushed together just down one signal path. That's the way I look at it. But if you can get your drums, vocals, bass, guitars, background vocals, if you can get everything to line up and have this dimensionality where you can almost, look into that mix and just feel every single element as it goes further and further back, you are winning. You're winning when it comes to mixing. And there's a lot of tricks and a lot of different things you can do to achieve depth in a mix, but you have to start definitely listening and mixing like you're just in like a concert hall and you're just like hearing the sounds as they go further and further back in depth in that hall, So, your loudest sounds are definitely more upfront, right in your face, very close to you, and the more distant sounds are definitely quieter in the mix, maybe have a little bit more reverb, maybe not as much high end, stuff like that. But when you collapse your mix down to mono, you can really get a sense of that and just perceive where kind of sounds are in depth with each other. As well as mixing at low volume. Mixing at low volume is critical in the game when I started doing this, because now I realize that this is where clarity really comes from in mixing. You can blast your speakers and mix like that, but you lose detail. You can't register and pick up on details, the slightest little details in your mix. And what I've realized over my career of mixing 10 plus years or so is that it's about all the little intricate little things that you add to shape and inform the detail in the mix. Just the little things, all these little things that add up to make a really great mix. So when you're listening to your mix at really low volume, you can really pick up on all the transients, so all the drums, anything that jumps out. Frequencies are more clear to hear, the mid-range. If something is, peaking and spiky and annoying in your ear, it's going to be much easier to hear. Another trick is when you're mixing at very low volume, we're talking about like speaking level. Like if you can't hear someone who's talking to you, then your mix is too loud at that point. But when we're talking about low mixing volume, another trick is if you get your drums really punchy at low volume where you can like feel them, even though your speakers aren't even loud. By the time when you turn up your speakers to like a regular listening level, or even like a party level, like your drums are gonna knock so much harder. So that's another way that you're gonna be able to achieve a lot more punch in your mixing, in your mastering as well. Another thing that really shaped my progression in mixing is mixing with the mindset of textures. I think of my mixes nowadays more than ever as different shapes and textures instead of just sounds. And what do I mean by that? You can shape sounds within your mix drastically nowadays with plugins. You can add different harmonic saturators on there. You can run them through tape. You can do a lot of things that shape the texture of the sound wave or the vocal or whatever it may be. And what do I mean by texture specifically? It's kind of like just the way the sound kind of hits you, the way that it kind of feels. You can have a lot of sounds in a mix, a lot of different tracks that sound similar, but their textures are different, and that's kind of what separates them. And so by using things like EQ, different types of plugins, because if you didn't realize, like when you're mixing, especially anything that is emulated off of an analog piece of gear, all of these plugins have some form of, like, if the audio passes through it, it's going to automatically give that piece of audio a slightly different texture, just because that's what it does in the analog world traditionally anyway. So if you notice that, there's definitely some plugins that is way more noticeable than other ones. But so just even like thinking in terms of mixing as in like what plugins am I choosing, not necessarily because of the functionality sometimes, but because of just the texture that I'm able to achieve from just running audio through this plugin is going to separate it from different audio that may be similar. And that brings up another point for me as well, is just like separation is key in a mix. You want things to feel, you want the mix as a whole to feel cohesive, but at the same time you want all the different elements in a mix to feel pretty much as separated as possible, so that everything has the most space between each other, so that you can identify these different elements in the mix so much easier and everything is much more clear. And so like just mixing with the mindset of looking at things as like texture, like paintings. I look at my mixes as like a canvas and I'm painting, and when I apply a plugin, it's sort of like, what type of brush do I want to use when I paint right now? Do I want to use a thick brush? Do I want to use a thin brush? All of these things contribute to different textures, which allow, at the end of the day, this painting, when you step back, which is in reference to your mix, you step back and look at this painting, and now what you see is just an incredible complex layer of different textures, different things, which all these different subtleties add to the complexity of it and make it interesting. So hopefully that wasn't like too complex, but that is definitely something that revolutionized the way I approach mixing, is just think about it in textures, think about how the different sounds hit you and make you feel, and not just about what you hear. Another thing that really revolutionized the way that I mix is finding like a really small speaker to test my music on. So for sure nowadays, as we all know, a lot of us listen to music through our headphones, earbuds, AirPods, on our iPhones or phones. Majority of any place that you hear music, majority of the time, the only thing that you're hearing, at least the majority of the time, is the mid-range. So the mid-range is so important. And when I started to focus on how much I can do in the mid-range and how much I can clear up the mid-range, my mixes, started to just go crazy from there. So what I did basically was I went and bought a very small, plug it, a very small, Bluetooth speaker like this. This is one that my girlfriend actually gave me, and I've always liked the sound of it, and it translates so well. Let's see, this is the Insignia, model number is the NSCSPBTHOLBK. So if you remember all those letters I just put in, you can literally go search for this same speaker. I don't even know if they make it anymore. But basically this speaker right here, when I turn it on and I run my mix through it, it only gives me the mid-range information. And when you're able to just listen to that mid-range information instead of these really nice monitors that we now have that give you the full spectrum, you really pay attention a lot more to like the music elements, your you know, where your vocal is level-wise. A lot of these things, you know, when you have like a mix and the bass is hitting and your highs are high, sometimes that, I mean, that's amazing. That sounds good. We all like that feeling of like super loud bass and the highs are crystal clear. And honestly, you'll listen to your entire mix and be like, you know what, that sounds really good. Bass is bumping, like I'm solid. But you may fail to realize that your mid-range is actually, you know, just washy and not really detailed. And if you were just to look at your mid-range just on a very small speaker such as this one, or even small headphones can do it too, you would realize that your mid-range isn't really clear or detailed. And the reason that you like your mix is just because the 808s are just hitting in comparison to like where the other levels of the different instruments or vocals or whatever have you are. So definitely another key would be to get a small speaker and just pay attention to the mid-range. If you can't get a small speaker, then sometimes what you can do is just add an EQ on your master bus and just filter off the top and bottom end so that you just have the mid-range and just sit there and listen and focus on the mid-range. That's not my favorite way to do it. I like to go to a whole different device to listen to the mid-range, but if you don't have anything else, I would try doing that. So just to wrap up what I basically went through, it's get a small speaker so that you can listen to your mixes in the mid-range frequencies and be able to mix more in your mid-range. Mix in mono, super important. Mix at low volume, super important. And I think the fourth thing, the last thing was mix with the mindset of textures and how each individual wave, whether that wave came from a vocal, a guitar, a bass, like how those things make you feel texturally. Like, sound waves are a real thing that hit us and pass through our body. And there's certain plugins and certain things we can do to manipulate the way that the waveform is and how it's going to, make you feel. So think of your mix in terms of textures as well, not just what you can hear, but kind of what you can feel. And I hope, some of that reasoning, some of that mindset behind mixing could help you in your mixing journey. If you still are someone who really struggles and you definitely want to, learn a lot quickly, I would check out my mini course that I just put out, a brand new mini course that I have on my website for mixing. Specifically, it talks about 7 or 8 or so different ways that you can improve and enhance your mix right before you finalize it. So even when you think maybe you got a mix that you think is finished right now, you take this free mini course right now, and you're gonna learn some things that you could do to your mix at this point. And I trust you, after doing those, you're definitely gonna enhance your mix and realize that there was actually levels further that you could go. So you can check that out. Link is in the description below to download that. Otherwise, leave me a comment. I would love to know what are some things that are still challenging you in regards to mixing. Otherwise, there's a ton of other videos of me mixing and mastering and different things on my channel, so make sure to check those out. Any questions, drop them below. Comment, like, subscribe. I appreciate you guys every time. Princeton Brown from Sonic Gold Productions. See you later. Peace out.